You've been injured in an accident. What's going to happen next to the person who caused the accident? We're going to break it down here on this week's Monday Morning Lawyer. Good morning, everybody. It's Jobeth R, your accident and injury attorney, still broadcasting from my Elkton office here in downtown wonderful Elkton. Good morning. Happy Monday to everybody out there. So today we're going to talk about something that I am asked a lot, not in every case, but a lot. And that is what is going to happen to the at-fault driver who caused the accident. That usually I get this question from a client who's in my office and we're helping them with the injury claim. And they want to know about things like charges usually against this individual. And again, like I said, it's not in every case, but here's where we often see it. When it's a really, really bad accident. Somebody was doing something really, really stupid. They were texting while driving. Maybe they were intoxicated in one way, shape, or form. Maybe they actually received tickets or a citation from a responding officer to the scene. Clients want to know, hey, what's going to happen with this? What impact does it have on my case? Is this person in some situations going to do jail time or have to pay fines or anything like that? And the answer is that it really depends. There's a few layers to this. Number one, in the state of Maryland, there are no private prosecutors. They're all working for the state. They're all hired by the state. So, in most counties, the head state's attorney for that county is actually an elected official, and then he or she hires the staff underneath of them. And they are the ones, in conjunction with the various law enforcement agencies, who are responsible for levying charges against an individual of any type. The regular crimes that have nothing to do with the vehicle, as well as if there are citations or other charges that need to arise from an auto accident type of situation. So, are there going to be charges against the individual who caused the accident? Well, that's not a question that I or an attorney like me, a private attorney, is going to be able to answer. So, if there's curiosity about that, I would always instruct my clients that you have to talk to either the officer who reported, that came to the scene, or more likely those things happen through the state's attorney's office. Now, as far as if the officer wrote a citation on the scene, which happens a lot, the question then comes up, and I know that a long time ago we did a podcast episode about if when you go to court as a witness for the state. So the state does not actually represent you if you are a victim in the injury in the criminal or traffic case. You are just a witness for the state. The state is the one that the prosecutor actually represents because the individual allegedly violated some sort of crime or statute that is the state law. So they have the jurisdiction, and the state is actually the plaintiff in those criminal or serious traffic cases. You're just a witness there. You have a right to be there, and you have a right to be heard as part of that if it goes to trial. And the defendant, if you are making claims and assertions against that defendant that are part of these charges, the defendant has a right to put you on trial, or not to put you on trial, to put you on the stand during the trial, my apologies, and have their attorney cross-examine you, or they can cross-examine you themselves, which is never the best idea, but that's another topic for another day. So I'm often asked about, hey, do you go to court with me? Do I go to court with you if you're summoned for the criminal trial? And the answer to that question usually is no, because you're just there as a witness. Will I do it upon request? Have I done it before? In certain situations, but oftentimes it's not necessary. In a more serious situation, there's actually an organization called the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, who in some of these situations, and really any of these situations where there's criminal charges, will provide advocacy and make sure that you are aware of and get anything that you might be entitled to right-wise through that process. But that is, to be clear, the criminal side of the process. On the other side, the world in which I operate, and attorneys like me, is the civil side of the process. This is us getting you, our client, compensated for the damages sustained, the injury sustained, the loss of work, loss of use of vehicle, all of those other things that we've talked about extensively on this podcast for years of episodes. That happens in the civil context. And what may also be, and is sometimes bad news to some of my clients, is that it's not actually that individual. It's almost never the individual who caused the accident who's paying these claims. When we resolve a case for a client, no matter how much money we're getting for them, little cases, big cases, all the ones in between, the check shows up and is issued by the insurance company. Insurance companies pay these settlements. If they go to trial, insurance companies pay these verdicts. The attorney or attorneys who are defending the civil trial are also hired by the insurance company, paid for by the insurance company. And there's oftentimes, in some of these cases, a question as to whether or not they are representing the interest of the defendant or the interest of the insurance company. Sometimes, most of the time, those interests align. Sometimes they deviate. So there's oftentimes an ethical question that goes into who they truly represent. But the important element here is that in 99% of the instances, nothing financially is going to happen in the civil case to the individual themselves. The money comes from the insurance company, even when there's a defendant there. So the all of that roundabout stuff to talk about what happens to that individual. So there's two different tracks, criminal and civil. We handle and work with injured people on the civil side of things, which is the money side of things, and which is a disappointment to some of my clients. The insurance companies pay, not the individual. Now, the individual might get dropped. Their rates might go up. Who knows what might happen to them? They might get some surcharges. But, when we settle the case for $1 million, let's say, for example, that the insurance company is paying, the individual who caused that accident, rates aren't going up that high. They're never going to recoup those funds directly from that individual. Insurance is a pooled risk sort of thing. They're making that money through hundreds and hundreds and thousands, tens of thousands sometimes of clients. With the bigger companies, even more. All the money's going in and then being invested and distributed to pay these claims or defend these claims or whatever they choose to do. So that kind of answers the question there. On the criminal side, my office has absolutely nothing to do with it. We don't defend the defendants. There are private attorneys who do that. If you need one, we have some that are in the area that we absolutely trust and know do a fantastic job. So don't hesitate to call us looking for one of those referrals, but understand that if you do, it will not be it won't be me or an attorney from my office that's handling that case. We'll get you to somebody that we trust and they'll take care of you. Or you can, talk to them about it. You have to hire them. The public defender is often an opportunity and an option for a lot of folks in a lot of situations, not everything. I think you have to have a charge in which you could potentially do jail time to qualify for the public defender. There's also financial considerations there. I don't know the details, but the public defender's office certainly does. And as far as pursuing criminal charges, the jurisdiction and the ability, the power, so to speak, to bring those charges, to pursue those charges, to follow through with those, all comes from the state's attorney's office, or in very, very select situations, the attorney general's office, also an agency of the state. So that's all the time we have for you today. I hope that's helpful. This actually came from a few questions that I know that podcast folks that listen to the podcast had expressed. So thank you for that. If you have a question that may be great for other people to know about for the podcast, shoot us an email about it. We are still probably a few weeks away from having it dedicated to the podcast website set up. When we do, there will be a contact form there for you to put your questions in or topics that you want to see on the podcast. If you're doing it via email, as I've said before, please, please, please mention that you want your question talked about on the podcast. We won't name your name, much like we didn't name anybody who brought these questions to us. And quite frankly, this is a question that we get from clients all the time. So eventually I was going to get to this, even if it didn't come from a podcast watcher. So thank you for that, for getting this kind of fast tracked into that process. Interested in previous episodes of the podcast, other topics that we've talked about? For now, go to bowerslawmd.com. At the very, very top, where the phone number for the office is, you will see where you can see testimonials and a link to our podcast. You can also call us from here, submit a form, have us talk to you absolutely free up front, consultations, and with the representation on these accident cases, as we spoke about in the past. I believe last week's episode, actually, we talked about how we handle these cases with no money up front. So you don't have to bring money to hire us. In fact, at the end, we're going to hand you a check. So that's all the time I have for this week. Thanks again for tuning in. This is super important. I'm also excited because we are literally just a month or so away from moving into this new podcast studio in downtown Elkton. That's going to be super fun. And there's going to be a lot of different content coming from a lot of different creators and organizations. I hear the town of Elkton's going to start doing a show, or at least the Alliance. That's going to be fun. The Sports Weekly newspaper is going to start doing some ESPN style TV type broadcasts. Those are going to be coming out in a format similar. So super exciting stuff coming here in Elkton and in Cecil County. So be safe out there, everybody. Be well, and we will see you right back here next week for another episode of the podcast.